everyone, welcome back to my channel. For today's video I thought I would do another tag video, and today's tag is talking about one of my favourite things, and that is eyeshadow palettes. This tag was created in a recent collaboration between Samantha and Allie Glines. I will link both of their videos and channels in the description box below. And in honour of Sam creating this tag, I'm actually wearing the liquid lipstick from her recent collaboration with Ofra Cosmetics. This is the Story liquid lipstick. I absolutely love the shade, so really happy to be kind of repping her collaboration with Ofra as well. I think this may have originally stemmed from an idea on TikTok, but the first videos I seen on YouTube were that of Samantha's and Allie's, so I will link theirs down in the description box below. Eyeshadow palette is definitely one of my favourite subjects, and just actually sat here now surrounded by eyeshadow palettes, I'm kind of in my element here. So this consists of 13 different tags for an eyeshadow palette, and I will run through them in the list as Samantha and Allie did, and I will link that list in the description box below in case you want to do this tag for yourself. When pulling out the eyeshadow palettes to do this video, I did try and avoid duplicates as much as I could, but there are a couple of categories where I did have to pick the same palette twice. But why don't we get started? First item is your newest eyeshadow palette. Up until yesterday this would have been a completely different eyeshadow palette, but coincidentally in the post this morning my newest eyeshadow palette arrived, so it has now changed, and this is literally fresh out the box. I haven't really even opened it properly yet, and this is the Jeffree Star Cosmetics and Shane Dawson Conspiracy palette. This is the actual palette itself. So this is definitely one of the most kind of extra palettes that I have. I don't think I've owned a palette before which has clasps on it. But here is the palette inside. It isn't as heavy as I thought it might be considering the bulk of it, but it is just a really pretty palette, and the pan sizes are so much bigger than I thought they would be. So I am really excited to give this one a go. Yeah, this is my newest palette. Then on to my oldest eyeshadow palette, and that is the Urban Decay Original Naked palette. I think this is most people's oldest palettes. I think I've had this palette for around about 5 years, if I remember rightly when I got it. I know they say you should probably only keep eyeshadow palettes open for about a year, but who actually sticks to that rule? Performance of the shadows still work great. I don't have any issues with them at all. Nothing smells off, so I'm still very happy to use this palette, and will probably use it until nothing remains in each of these pans. I had, if I'm honest, neglected this palette for a little while and hadn't reached for it because I kept buying new palettes and had new and exciting ones to play with, but found myself reaching for this a little while back, and I felt really guilty that I'd left it alone for so long because it is a great palette. It is a very comfort feeling palette in that I don't really need to think when I open this. I have my go-to shades and my go-to looks, so this is a great palette and I will definitely not be parting with this anytime soon. Then on to my most expensive palette, and here's the first duplicate. It is definitely the Conspiracy palette. This palette cost me £52. It does retail on Beauty Bay for £54, but because I bought it on the website Beautylish, with the exchange rate and things, it ended up coming out my bank at £52, so I did save a couple of pounds, and I think I probably did get it sooner than if I would have ordered it on Beauty Bay, because I do believe Beautylish had their restock before Beauty Bay did. So it has come all the way from the US, everything's intact, which I'm really happy about. But yeah, this is definitely my most expensive palette. When I did stumble across the restock of it on the website, I did add it to the basket and I did sleep on it, because I thought if this palette is still here the next day after as much demand as it had, they didn't publicise the restock on Beautylish, so that could be why. But when I logged on the next morning, it was still in my basket and it was still in stock, so I decided to bite the bullet and check out, because it is a palette that I had my eye on, because it is really expensive, and no, I definitely don't need it in my collection, but I have been wanting to try the Jeffree Star Cosmetics eyeshadow formula, and out of all the palettes that he's released, I think this is the one that has the most neutral tones in and more shades in there that I think I'll reach for than other ones. Even though it was expensive, to me it's more of not an investment as such, but it does bring uniqueness to my collection, which for me to spend that amount of money on, that's what I feel like I needed. I didn't need it at all, but I mean, that's how I kind of justified the cost of it, because it had a bit more uniqueness than other palettes I've bought as of late. Then to the other end of the spectrum, next one is the most affordable palette. There was a couple of contenders for this one, and in the end I decided to go for the e.l.f. New Classics palette. The reason I went for this one is because these retail for just £14, which, even though there are the likes of Colourpop palettes and things that are cheaper than that, this one has 18 shades in it. So I believe for the price point that is really affordable for 18 shades. I think Colourpop does have 18 or £20 palettes, but they retail for sort of $18, $20. So like I say, this is 14, so I think this is the most affordable in my collection. It's not the cheapest, I do definitely have cheaper palettes, but I tried to base it on the thing of price, amount of shades, and also quality as well. And the quality of these shades is great. This would be a kind of palette if I used it without knowing which brand it was. I would definitely think it was more high end. So for me, this is my most affordable palette. Then we have my everyday palette, and this one is the Nubian by Juvia's Place. This is one that I will regularly reach for, especially on days when I don't want to think too hard about my looks. But I feel like with the shades in here, there's still enough of a difference to create different looks, and I don't end up with the same look over and over again. If sort of everything went wrong tomorrow and out of my entire collection, I could only keep one palette and it would be for everyday use, I think it would be this one that I would choose. The longevity of these shades is one of the best in my entire collection, so this is definitely what I would call my everyday palette. The next one is my most colourful palette, and for this one I went for the Ruby May Cosmetics Vibes palette. This is one that I got in a Tribe Beauty box at some point last year, and every shade in here is bright, so this one was quite easy to pick as my most colourful palette. I did consider the BH Cosmetic Weekend Festival palette, but that does have a handful of neutral shades in there, whereas this is all brightly coloured. This palette does really intimidate me, and I think this is one that I will use more as an accent palette. I don't think I could create a whole look in here unless I just went in with one shadow all over the lid. I just don't know what to do with this much colour. Quality wise, it is a great palette and the shades do perform really well. It just really intimidate me, being not a very colourful shadow lover. But I do love having a palette like this in my collection to reach into should I need to. Next is the smallest eyeshadow palette, and without doubt that goes to these mini palettes from e.l.f. These did nearly come in for the most affordable because of how cheap they are. These are £3 each, and for 4 shades and the quality of these, that is really great value. But because I did want to try and avoid duplicates and I knew these would definitely be the smallest palettes, I felt like I did have enough justification to pick the other e.l.f. palette as the affordable. So the brand won out in the end, but definitely these are my smallest. So I have Truffles, Cream and Sugar and Rosewater. I haven't used them enough yet to fully establish which one is my favourite, but I'm thinking I'm leaning towards Cream and Sugar. But all 3 of them are great, and I say for £3 each, they are a great addition to anyone's makeup collection. They are going to be perfect for travel. I know for sure when we can travel again, I will be taking 1 if not 2 of these on holiday with me. They do have, I believe, 8 of these in total, but I think I'm happy with the 3 that I've got. I believe out of the other ones, there's not really another palette in there that speaks to me, and the shade stories are not kind of thing I would like to go for. So even though these are neutrals and not necessarily groundbreaking colours to add to my collection, I do absolutely love these palettes and they are just the cutest thing. Literally it fits in the palm of my hand. Then on to biggest eyeshadow palette, and that is without doubt my Morphe Jaclyn Hill palette. I presume this is going to be a lot of people's biggest palettes or something from Morphe anyway. This is a £35 palette, so it is by far the largest in my collection, but I would say this to me is a great palette if you didn't want a lot of eyeshadow palettes in your collection. If you did just want to go out there and purchase one palette, this would be a great one to do so, because you've got your bits of colour, you've got your kind of dark smoky colours, you've got your pinky peachy shades, and then you've got your light neutrals. It does a bit of everything. The quality of this palette is really great as well. The shades are all really nice and blendable, they are decently pigmented, and it is quite easy to work with. So if you are looking to start out, you don't have much eyeshadow in your collection, I would highly recommend this palette. Next is palette with the best memory. I don't have an awful lot of memories associated with eyeshadow palettes as such. There were a couple that sort of sprung to mind. I mean, I think I bought this palette on my honeymoon, so that kind of is good memories that I bought this on my honeymoon. It's the first high-end eyeshadow palette I bought, but because I'd kind of covered that with it being the oldest, I wanted to see if there was any others I could think of. And the next one that I thought of was this one from Too Faced. This is the Too Faced Born This Way The Natural Nudes palette. This is one that is newer to my collection, but this is the one that I treated myself to when I passed my exam. I took an exam to do with my job in January of last year and failed it. I then did a resit of the exam in January this year, and I was adamant that I had failed the exam. So when I passed, it was such a nice surprise and I was on such a high, and I'd seen this palette go on sale that I treated myself to it for passing my exam. So when I see this palette, it does remind me that I could do it and I could achieve it. I suppose it does have nice connotations in that respect. So this is the one that I ended up going for. Next is the palette that I have that is worth the hype. So the one that I landed on, again, it is kind of a more recent one, so the hype of the palette is more fresh in my mind, and that is the Colourpop Going Coconuts palette, and it is one of the Colourpop £9 palettes, which at this point they now have a lot of. They first of all did the brightly coloured ones, then they did some pastel shade ones, and now they're doing some more neutral toned ones. I think this was the first of the more neutral toned ones. But so many people raved about how much they love this palette. It was just so easy to work with. The shades were just such good quality, and I do have to agree with that. Don't get me wrong, the three middle shades do create a bit of fallout, but it doesn't bother me too much, and it's the kind of fallout that is easy to brush away, and every single one of the mattes in this palette blends beautifully. Again, this is kind of another palette that could fall into the everyday category, but I wanted to put it here because I know this palette did have a lot of hype and a lot of people have enjoyed using it since receiving it, and I would highly recommend it, especially if you've not tried the formula of the Colourpop 9 palettes. Next is a palette that's not worth the hype, and I did have a couple here that I felt I could mention. The first one is the Anastasia Beverly Hills Norvina palette. This is my first experience with an Anastasia Beverly Hills palette, and I did go into this palette knowing that the mattes in her palettes are slightly more pigmented, but I hadn't appreciated that I would struggle working with them. I'm by all means definitely not talented when it comes to eyeshadow application. I would still class myself as a beginner, and overly pigmented shadows definitely intimidate me. No matter how light of a hand I go in with these shadows, I do just really struggle to work with them. This shade here, Incense, is probably the kind of lightest shade to go in with the crease, but even then it's so super rich. I don't think it's the palette's problem itself. I think it is all completely user error. But this palette to me had so much hype, and yes, people did say that the shadows were really pigmented, especially the mattes, but they did say they were blendable and workable, and I just don't find that at all. I find if I try and put one of the darker shades in my outer corner, it takes a lot of blending because it does kind of cling to the wrinkles on my eyelid, which again, that's to do with my wrinkles on my eyelids that mightn't affect someone else. It is probably a great palette to a lot of people, but for me, I do kind of regret purchasing it. With regards to the shimmer shades, I also struggle to work with these too. They are the softest shimmer shades I think I've ever worked with, and I find that these cause an excessive amount of fallout. I find with these shimmers, when you wipe them away, I just end up smearing the shadow under my eye. So this is a palette that I will always apply my eyeshadow before I apply my base. General rule, I always apply my base first, but if I know I'm going to be using this palette, I always go in with this palette first so I can wipe away the excess with micellar water or something like that, because just trying to brush it off, in my opinion, doesn't work. I feel like it actually clings to foundation, if anything. So I was really disappointed with this product, and for me personally, it wasn't worth all the hype, and it has put me off purchasing other Anastasia Beverly Hills palettes. The other kind of honorary mention that I wanted to put in this category was the Urban Decay Born to Run palette. For me, I don't think this one was kind of worth the hype as well, and I also don't feel like the formula of these shadows works as well as the Naked formula, which I have quite a few Naked palettes. I don't think this formula is the same quality as them. Now I'm technically cheating mentioning two products in that, and maybe I should do a whole video of products not worth the hype. And the penultimate category is favourite palette from favourite brand. and I wanted to include a brand that I hadn't mentioned because there's so many palettes here that are favourites, but I hadn't mentioned anything from BH Cosmetics, which is definitely one of my favourite brands when it comes to eyeshadow palettes, and this is the Sylvia Garni palette. This is a palette that I actually got as a free gift when I spent, I think it was £15 on BH Cosmetics, and this palette actually retails for about £21–22, so the fact I got it for free is a bonus, but I did absolutely fall in love with this palette. I do really rate the BH Cosmetics formula. I have, I believe, 3 eyeshadow palettes from them, and I love every single one of them. This is definitely my favourite one out of the 3, hence why I'm mentioning it here, because I feel like this one's got a bit more versatility compared to the other 2 that I have. One being the Weekend Festival palette, which is more of a brighter palette, so not one I overly reach for. And then the other is the Royal Affair palette, which is a great everyday palette, but is slightly more darker toned. Whereas I feel like this has the darker tones, it has the nudes, it has the sort of little bright pops of colour as well. Also got these highlighting shades down the side, so this to me covers a bit of everything and is great formula wise, and I'm so glad that I got to try this. And I do kind of want to try more palettes from BH Cosmetics because I do love the formula so much. And then the final category is most used palette. And when I had a look through, there are quite a lot of palettes that I have had a good go of. Obviously the palettes that I've had for longer are more used than my more recent ones, but the one I went for is this one from Colourpop, and this is the You Had Me at Hello palette. And this is one that I do just find myself reaching for time and time again. This is another palette that I don't really need to think of what I'm doing when I go to create a look from it. I do have my kind of couple of signature looks that I do take from this palette, but I feel like it's got a nice mix of shades in that I can go more lighter, I can go more deeper tones, and then I can just go for a kind of light shimmer with a slightly darker outer corner. They are my kind of go-to looks from this one. I do just find it so easy to work with. I don't know how well it will pick up on camera, but there is quite a few dents in some of these shades. It is a well-used palette, most definitely. It does make me want to try more of the 12 pan palette from Colourpop. The formula is outstanding. I feel like the formula in this is ever so slightly better than the 9 pan formula. Definitely wouldn't be surprised if I hit pan on one of these shades. I won't say soon, but I feel like this would be one of the first palettes that I am likely to hit pan in on a shade. So yeah, this one gets the trophy for my most used. So that is it for the eyeshadow palette tag. That was really fun to do and nice to just look into my eyeshadow palette collection and sort of give everything a label. If you do want to do this tag yourself, I will leave the categories in the description box below. And thanks to Sam and Allie for creating this tag because it was really fun to do. So that is it for today's video. If you did enjoy it, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe if you're not already. Thanks.